Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Page 52. Today I'm going to start a new article which is the strengths and the limitations of different qualitative research methods, including unstructured interviews, semi-structured interviews, group interviews, overt and covert participation, and non-participation and participant observation. So first of all, let's begin with unstructured interviews. As it is mentioned by the term itself, unstructured. It means we are not planning up to the mark. Unstructured interviews enable researchers to acquire an understanding of how people think and feel. Respondents are encouraged to talk freely about the things they feel are important. See that, as I mentioned earlier, unstructured means we are not planning to fix things. I mean, it's simply the choice of the researcher. He simply take anything, for instance, and put the choice on the respondent. For instance, I randomly choose you guys. Okay, let me something. What are the biggest issue you people are facing? So from my point of view, it is not a thing which is structured, not planned anything. I come to any place, I need to talk to any group or the group of people, just simply start asking about different thing, and the choice is given to the respondent. Whatever is coming to them, I mean, they can simply share to researcher. So this is we have in unstructured interviews. What are the strengths? Thus, researchers' limited input means that data reflects the interest of the respondent. It is therefore more likely to be an accurate and detailed expression of their beliefs, allowing the respondent to talk freely in their own words. Avoids the problem of the researcher prejudging what makes important are irrelevant data. The researcher must establish a strong understanding with the respondent. If this is achieved, people who do not trust being studies can open up to the researcher, allowing sensitive issues to be explored in detail. If the research is relatively informal, it can take places somewhere the respondent will feel comfortable or at ease, such as their home. So I mean, when we talk about the unstructured interviews, the very few things you need to understand. Unstructured, we are not planning for everything. We need to simply switch to our respondent, and whatever is coming from respondent point of view, it is important to researchers. So I mean, the important thing is that, I mean, researcher needs to be more friendly. There must be trust building measures between the researcher and the respondent, so respondent can freely answer the relevant questions, and they can simply deliver, which is important not only for their life, but at the same time it will be a lot of helpful to those people who are suffering the same problem, are the victims. So this is the strength of the unstructured interviews. It is a kind of informal activity. I mean, even it is possible that the interview or unstructured interview can even take place at the respondent's home as well, or any place where respondent can feel freely and have the freedom to talk whatever the respondent like to. But there are certain limitations with this unstructured interview. Carrying out unstructured interview requires considerably skill. The researcher must resist the temptation to influence, encourage, or interpret, and the researcher by design has little control over the direction of the interview, and the conversation may lead into areas that later prove irrelevant to the research. The interviews are time consuming, and so are analyzing and interpreting all the data they generate. Analyzing may involve listening to a recording of the interview and transcribing it. Reliability is low because the non-standardized format makes the interview impossible to replicate. Another limitation is that all forms of the interviewing are naturally biased by interview effects. A respondent may try to please the researcher by telling them what they believe the researcher wants to hear, perhaps influenced by what they know of the interviewer from their interaction. So the limitations, I need to categorize limitations by two ways: the limitations from the researcher point of view and the limitations from the respondent point of view. I mean, the very first thing about the researcher, I mean, you need to be skillful. I'm talking in reference to researcher. You need to be skillful, so you can simply give a possible way out from all the direction or all the things which are being discussed in the interview. So I mean, if the researcher is skillful and really know how to take the important things out of the respondent, then it will be a bit useful. Otherwise, it will take a lot of time. It's a time-consuming activity, and as I mentioned earlier, unstructured interviews are not that much reliable because they can simply tell us about a specific issues. For instance, if I talk about you, you can tell me certain thing which is important to you, but it is not necessary that the things which are important to you is even important to your sister or your brother or your family member as well. So it will take a lot of time. This is one of the limitations. um, it's difficult to replicate, obviously, because it simply depends on the individual's activity, individual feeling. Secondly, thirdly, I mean, it's difficult to get the things which is desired, because when you simply put everything on respondent, so it is a choice of respondent to respond according to their own will. And the lastly, the thing is that, I mean, as I mentioned earlier, it is informal activity, so it can be that much reliable. It cannot be replicated because it's simply switching from one place to another, and it's simply switching from person to person. And obviously, the choice of one person is entirely different to other person. So this is the limitations in unstructured interview. The next thing we have is semi-structured. See that it's semi-structured. So it means when we talk about the semi-structure, so certain things are in control and certain things are put to respondent. So semi-structure interviews are basically this type of interview attempts to combine the strength of unstructured and structured interview. Researchers are free to ask questions in any order and to phrase the question as they think best. Semi-structured interview therefore allow a respondent to talk at length and in depth about a particular subject. The interview has a structure or interview schedule, the area interview wants to focus on, but there is no list of specific questions. Different respondents may be asked different questions on the same topic. So I mean, as it is mentioned by its term, semi-structure. So there you need to understand two things. Semi-structure means the choice of the topic. So it simply is the choice of the researcher to identify about the topic. For instance, I'm the researcher, so I'm planning uh, to think early marriage. I mean, this is my interest of discussion. So I simply switch to many people, many individuals, group of people, different communities, just to ask what they are thinking about early marriage. I mean, marriage should be done, I mean, in 20s or before 20s. So the topic is going to be selected by the researcher. So this is semi-structured, the thing which is structured. And there are certain questions which are fixed. Certain questions, not all questions, certain questions are fixed, because I need to ask what is your age, for instance, what is your, how do you define it's a love marriage or arranged marriage or early marriage, at the later age of your at later age you are going to tie the knots with any person. So certain questions are fixed, topic is fixed, that is the reason it is called structured. So it is semi-structure. Why it is semi-structure? Because we need to talk to different people about the same subject. So I mean, there is a lot of things you can get out of it, and this is a kind of variation. And what is required in semi-structure interview is all you need to take the representation from all the groups. I mean, for instance, you need to talk to teenagers, you need to talk to adults, you need to talk to even the parents. I mean, those parents who are responsible, especially the Asian parents who are responsible, who are going to decide the marriage of their siblings. So these are the things which are involved in semi-structured interview. There are certain things like open-ended questions are frequently used in semi-structured interviews. Some of these are created before the interview, while other arise naturally from whatever the respondent wants to talk about. So as I mentioned earlier, there are certain things which are fixed. So when you ask fixed questions to different people, obviously they respond in a different way. So when they respond in a different way, obviously then we have more questions which are relating or which are interlinked with the respondent answer. So what are the strengths? As there are no specific questions prepared, there is less risk of researchers deciding predetermining what will be discussed, where the respondents can talk about the things that interest them. So one of the strengths about the semi-structure interview, it is in detail. We can get everything from one respondent, give a lot of knowledge. Again, I must say, I mean, there must be a sort of trust between researcher and respondent. Then you people are able to understand what is actually the things are. Secondly, the strength of this thing, to some way, you can say that we can replicate as well. You know why we can replicate? I mean, there are certain issues which are relating to females. There are certain females, they have the their courage to come in front of the camera. They are ready to let the researcher to study about their own life, so they can simply open about their issues. They can simply talk. This kind of discussion is very helpful for those people who don't have courage to simply put their life I mean, into light. So I mean, there's the things which are important in semi-structured. By allowing respondents to develop their ideas, the researcher tries to discover what someone really means. Things are believed. The focus on issues that the respondent consider important result in much greater depth of information. This may increase the validity of the data, as it is more likely that the research will achieve its real aim. See that whenever we talk about the qualitative data is all about the behavior. When we talk about the semi-structure interview, it's all about the respondent's call. It's all about the ball is in the court of respondent. So I mean, if respondent have the courage to tell us about details, it will be very helpful. It is very helpful because through them, we are able to get some sort of solution of such problems, which is not openly discussed so often. There are certain limitations we have. This method demands certain skills in the researcher. Again, the same limitation, I must say. Researcher needs to be skillful. Researcher, see that, I mean, for instance, it's important that you can talk to somebody in detail, but at the same time, I mean, it will take a lot of time. If you simply put each and everything on respondent, it is the waste of time at the same time, because respondent is not that thought-provoking. He like to talk a lot, and there are so many things which are irrelevant. So the limitations of semi-structure interview is it takes a lot of time, time consuming. I mean, you need to be very careful. I'm talking for researcher, because if researcher has the skill or is good at discussion, so it will be far more better for both parties, researcher and the respondent, to get what is desired or what is useful for other people as well. Semi-structure interviews are not only more time consuming than questionnaire, but the large amount of information they produced must be analyzed and interpreted. Obviously time consuming, and there's so much things which is, you can say, irrelevant, and we need to, you can say, cut and edit or analyze just to put to have a data which is useful for other people as well. Respondent must remember and describe past events, and this creates problem for both researcher and respondent. While a researcher has no way of knowing whether someone is telling the truth, a further problem is that it may not only be difficult to remember things that have happened a month or a year ago, but memories can also be selective. Respondent only remember those things that seems important to them. Imperfect recall. Finally, semi-structure interview lack standardization. The same questions are not necessarily put to all the respondent, and similar questions may be phrased differently. This makes analyzing data and generalizing a bit difficult. So again, you need to be skillful, very time consuming, irrelevant data is there. I mean, obviously, if we let our respondents talk a lot, so it is difficult to analyze, it is difficult to interpret. These kind of things are there in the limitations of semi-structure interview. The last thing we have is the group interview. Discuss topic. Group interview involve respondent gathering to discuss a topic decided to in advance by the researcher. These groups may be selected as representative samples across section of society. For example, they may simply represent a group that the researcher wants to explore in detail. So as it is mentioned by its terms, like group interviews, so obviously there are a lot of people. There must be the complete representation in a group. For instance, if you can say I am in a university or I'm in a talk show, so I would like to invite people who can represent the different level of age group. For instance, if I want to talk about a specific topic, I want my group or the target group should be representing all the age groups. The success of the group interview depends on an interview structure with clear guideline. In group interview, it is important to have a guideline. We need to make sure that the respondents should not interact with each other during the interview, because if they cross question each other, there must be a sort of you can say a risk that they can simply fight, or there is a tiff, the oral tiff between each other. Advanced predetermined questions through which the experience of the participants can be explored. So before you get started with your interview, you need to talk a bit, just a kind of introduction with each other, and during introduction you need to clear certain things. It's all about the guideline, it's all about the topic, it's all about the flow of the interview. How we should take the interview in a specific flow so it will get the maximum output through the discussion. Interaction within the group, which give unique insight into people's shared understanding of everyday life. The skill of the researcher, who must, for example, try to ensure that the discussion is not dominated by one or two individuals. Obviously, it is one of the things which is important for researcher, and it is the responsibility of the researcher. He need to maneuver things, take the things, as I mentioned earlier. It must be a true representation. When we talk about the true representation, every single person should be given equal chances to describe, to talk in detail. Otherwise, it will not that helpful. The strength of the group interview. In group interview, the researcher can help the discussion. They can control the pace and the extent, scope of the discussion, plan a schedule that allow them to focus and refocus the discussion, ask questions, stop or change the focus of the discussion, create a situation that reflect how people naturally share and discuss idea. So what are the strengths? It must be informal. People are supposed to give freedom to talk whatever they like to, but there must be a schedule, there must be something which is pre-planned. You should have a flow of discussion there. All the flow of discussion should have a destination. There must be conclusion. Again, I must say the researcher is playing the pivotal part, because he or she will be the one who can simply control the flow of the discussion and give equal chances to the respondent, and try his or her level best to restrict the respondent not to fight with each other, not to argue with each other. So limitations: the researcher must control the behavior of the group to allow people to speak freely and openly about an issue while maintaining the focus of the research, which can require considerable skill. There may also be problems with representativeness. It is a careful selected group of 10. One person does not show up, the sample became unrepresentative. So again, there must be the true representation, and if it is true representation, even it is possible we can take a community, and in a community we can take every single member of a specific group. But you know what is important? The thing is, we will get a lot of stuff, we get a lot of positive and useful information through this group interview. But again, the replication, it's not ideal. Representativeness is not ideal. The things which is important to a specific community is not replicable. It is not important to different communities. For instance, if we are sitting in Pakistan, we talk about the problems of Pakistan. It is not important. The things which is important, which is the focal point of our discussion, is same, having the same importance for the community living in Saudi Arabia or the United Kingdom. The group interview are also at the risk from another type of interview effect, which has been called groupthink. This refers to the pressure people feel to arrive at a desired outcome. So this is one of the things, again, the limitations. For instance, we are in a group of 10 people. If the majority of the people have the same point of view, so it is possible the people who are try to go against against the majority, they hardly find courage to go against them. So that is one of the thing, I mean, which is one of the limitations of the group interview, because people won't feel comfortable, I mean, to go against a lot of the majority. One thing. Second thing is that the last thing is, I mean, it's all again is the researcher who can control. If researcher is not skillful, so all our labor, all our hard work will go waste. So for today, we got everything as far as the interviews are concerned. We studied about the group interview, its structure, uh, unstructured, semi-structured, and group interviews. For tomorrow, inshallah ta'ala, we will start with observation, and in observation we have